Margin is a function of markup and vice versa. They're not the same. They are a function of each other. So margin is a function of markup and markup is a function of margin, but they are not the same. They're not interchangeable. Welcome back to Midweek Modern Craftsman. Today, we are going to dive into a very exciting topic. Well, if I was in school, it probably wouldn't be that exciting, but being that we are dealing with money and your business and your well-being, it is a very exciting and engaging topic. We are going to dive into the nuts and bolts of a topic that every contractor, including myself, thinks they understand, but often we get wrong. And that's going to be the difference between markup and margin. And these are the foundation of pricing and profitability. So we're going to talk about what the difference is between the two, why it matters, and how mixing them up can cost you big time. So we'll break all this down with simple formulas, real world examples, and some insights to help you simplify these business principles. So if you are not in front of a computer, grab a notepad. This is not just about math. It's about understanding your numbers, understanding your money. And if you want to, which I would recommend, I would hop onto the website, moderncraftsman.co, and go to the blog section. And you'll be able to see all of the formulas. I have this condensed and distilled very simply, which will make way more sense than listening to this via podcast. But I obviously wanted to record a podcast to supplement this blog post. So I'll walk you through this. You probably should head on to the blog post on the website, moderncraftsman.co. Check that out. Listen to this. Go back to that so that you understand it. But the goal here for me today is just not everyone prices things the same way. The way that I do things may not be the same way that you do things, but when you're thinking of bigger companies, if you have a larger company and you are pricing out projects, right, and you're trying to determine what your markup is, a lot of times this is going to be for cost plus contractors, right? You have a markup between 12 and 18%, and that markup on your projects, the cost of those projects, does not indicate a 12 to 18% margin or profit margin. They are two different things. And typically that markup is going to be higher than your margin. So if you think that hey, I have a project and it cost me $100,000 and I'm putting a 10% markup on it, that you're making $10,000, you are not. Your margin is actually less than that $10,000. So I'm going to show you how to do that, how to understand how markup and margin are actually different as simply as I can. It may not sound extremely straightforward listening to this in podcast form. So that's why I recommend you go to the website, look at the blog post, look at the numbers, look at it while you're listening to this, not driving, not working, but sitting down and understanding this, because this is huge in understanding how these two business principles relate, how they affect each other, and also how they are different. Because without understanding that, without knowing that, you are going to struggle making sure that you're profitable and that you're sustainable, right? You could have a 100% markup on something and still, with the business structure and the cost of your business, direct and indirect costs, you could still not be a profitable, sustainable business. So I'm going to help walk you through this to understand how these two principles relate and how they're different, and how you have to understand why they're different, and also just how to calculate them in general. So the first thing that I'm going to dig into is markup. And I just gave you the example, right, where you're a cost plus contractor and you're trying to figure out what your markup is. So for remodeling, typically your markup's going to be higher than a smaller cost plus. I'm using big numbers just so that it's simple, so that you can understand it. But the smaller volume you do, the less money in sales and costs of projects. typically you're going to need a higher markup to generate a sustainable margin for your business. So I know just spoke about a lot of cost plus contractors who are doing full builds, having, that 12 to 18, 12 to 20% markup. But my numbers are going to be slightly different. If I was true cost plus and I'm doing smaller projects, you're going to need, you're not going to make money on a 10 to 20% markup with, a $50,000 to $100,000 project. It's just the numbers aren't there. So I have higher markups on these numbers. But the first example is going to be a kitchen example, right? And we are selling this kitchen for $75,000. So the cost of the kitchen is going to be less than that because the selling price of our kitchen includes our markup. So let's say that this kitchen, with all of our costs, direct and indirect, costs $50,000. Now we need to put a markup on that to build that profit into our project. So say I want a 50% markup on this kitchen. So that's going to be 50% above the cost of the job. So the way that you're going to figure that out is you're going to take your selling price, which is $50,000, and then you're going to multiply that by 1.5. And that's 1 equals 100%, which is 100% of the $50,000. And the 0.5 is 50% of that $50,000. So essentially, it's $50,000 times 1.5, which is going to give you your selling price of that kitchen, which is $75,000. So your markup percentage is calculated by taking the selling price, which is $75,000, subtracting it by the cost of that kitchen, which is $50,000. So that's going to give us $25,000, and dividing that by the cost of that project, which was $50,000. Multiplying that by 100 is going to give you your markup percentage. So our markup percentage is $50,000 in this example. Again, the cost of the kitchen renovation, direct and indirect cost, everything associated with that. Our business is $50,000. We want a 50% markup on that. That's $50,000 times 1.5. We're selling that kitchen for $75,000. Now, that $75,000 includes $25,000 worth of profit, but that is not a 50% profit. So this is where the margin and the markup differ. So a margin, I actually don't know. Hold on one sec. Sorry, I thought I went right into that without explaining to you what markup was in the first place, but I believe I did. If I didn't, again, markup is the percentage added to the cost of your work, labor, service, product sold, and it determines the full selling price of your job. So markup tells you how much you need to increase the cost to set the selling price. And that markup helps you determine how much to charge up and above beyond the cost of the products or the services. And it focuses on the price relative to the cost. So if I didn't tell you about it already, there it is. I don't think that reiterating that is a bad thing. I think I still have turkey fog brain. So that's markup. Now let's talk about the margin again. That markup gave us a $25,000 profit. So how are we going to determine our margin? So first thing we need to do is we need to determine what margin actually is. So margin, or gross profit margin, is the percentage of the selling price that is profit after deducting your costs. So margin helps you analyze profit as a portion of the revenue. So what's revenue? You should probably discuss that. Revenue is the total income earned by a business before any costs or expenses are deducted. And deducted could include the cost of the job, subcontractors, taxes, any other expenses that have to do with that project. So margin helps you analyze the profit as a portion of that revenue. So it focuses on profit relative to the price point. the selling price point of the job. Margin tells you how much of the selling price is profit. So in our last example, what percentage of $75,000 is profit? It was $25,000. That's not the percentage. What is the percentage of that? That's 33.33% of the selling price of that job, which is $75,000, is our profit. So $75,000 times 33.33% is going to give us $25,000 profit on that project. So the formula for that, again, in the example, we sold a kitchen for $75,000. It cost us $50,000 in direct and indirect costs to put that project in place. So the $25,000 gross profit reflects the 33.33% profit margin, or 33.33% of the $75,000 selling price. So simply put, the margin is 33% of the selling price of the job. So again, we have that $75,000 project. The cost is $50,000. So to determine our margin, we take $75,000, which is the selling price. We subtract the cost of the job. We divide that by the selling price of the job, which was $75,000, and we multiply that by 100. So that gives us 33.33%. I'll repeat that. The margin is going to be the selling price of the job, $75,000, minus the cost of the job, $50,000, which is going to give you $25,000. And you divide that by the selling price of the job. So $25,000 divided by $75,000 times 100 gives you 33.33%. That's how we determined our margin on that project. So a 50% markup on the $50,000 cost of the project gave us a $75,000 selling price for that project. And that gave us a $25,000 profit, which is a 33.33% profit margin. I hope that makes sense. I could go through that again. I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot and I'm talking to my children. Again, go to the website, go to the blog post, check this out. It'll make way more sense if you're having trouble following right now. So what are the key differences between these two, between markup and margin? Markup calculates profit as a percentage of the cost, right? So the cost is $50,000, 50% markup on top of that is going to give us a $75,000 job. So the markup calculates the profit as a percentage of the cost. The markup is calculating a $25,000 profit or a 33.33% profit margin as a percentage of the cost of that $50,000 project. Margin calculates profit as a percentage of the revenue or the selling price. So the selling price, the revenue is $75,000. We are determining our profit based on that selling price, not on the cost of the job. So the $75,000 is the revenue or the selling price, not the cost of the job, which is $50,000. So that's the key difference between those two things. What are some of the relationships between the two? Markup, a job with the same numbers, right? If it's the same project, the same costs that go into the job, markup is going to be higher than the margin percentage for the same selling or for the same cost and selling price. So in our example, right, you have that 50% markup, and that is going to be higher than the percentage of your margin. So we have 50% markup percentage, and we have a 33.33% margin percentage. So to figure out your margin percentage, and again, go to the website, margin percentage divided by 1 minus margin percentage times 100 is going to give you your markup percentage. So in this example that we just completed, to figure out and determine that you have a 50% markup percentage, you have your margin percentage which is 0.3333 in decimal form, because to go from 33% to a decimal, you're going to move that decimal place 2 to the left. So you have 0.3333 divided by 1 minus 0.3333 times 100 is going to give you 49.99%, or a 50% markup. Again, to go from a percentage to a decimal, move the decimal place 2 to the left. So if you have 50% and you want to make it a decimal, move the decimal 2 to the left, which is 0.5. So in that example, you have markup percentage, which is 33.33%. I move the decimal 2 to the left. That's 0.3333 divided by 1 minus 0.3333 times 100 is giving me approximately 50% markup. Now to determine our margin percent on that same project, it's going to be your markup percent, which is 50%, divided by 1 plus your markup percent, which is 50%, times 100. So again, to get from our markup percent, which is 50, to a decimal, move the decimal place 2 to the left. You have 0.5 divided by 1 plus 0.5. So 0.5 divided by 1.5 times 100 is going to give you a 33.33% margin. That's 0.5 divided by 1 plus 0.5 times 100 is a 33.33% margin. Again, you can take the 75,000, multiply that times 0.3333. It's going to give you $25,000, which is your 50% markup on a $50,000 job, and also your 33.33% margin on a $75,000 selling price of the project. So why does all of this matter? You should understand by now that the biggest thing is, right, if you're cost plus and you're saying, hey, I'm in order to make the profit that I need, I realize that I need to charge 50% markup on these kitchen projects. And you think that I just sold a job for $50,000, that I'm going to make a 50% markup on that, which is $25,000, right? You think that you are actually profiting 50% of the selling price of that job, and that is incorrect. You are only profiting 33.33% margin. So the number of money that you're pulling out is the same. It's still $25,000, but you are not making 50% margins on those projects. You are only making 33.33%. So your markups are helping you establish your pricing. So again, the $50,000 kitchen, my pricing is dictated by my markup, which is 50%. So the price of that kitchen, which is going to dictate my revenue, is $75,000. Your margins help you analyze the profitability. So your markups are establishing your pricing, and your margins are analyzing your profitability. And on the back end of that, again, we have the $75,000 in selling price or revenue, and we are determining that we have $25,000 profit, which is 33.33% profitability. So your markups are what you charge on top of your services or goods. They determine your selling price, and margins are the percentage of your selling price that is profit after your deductions and expenses. Margin is a function of markup and vice versa. They're not the same. They are a function of each other. So margin is a function of markup, and markup is a function of margin, but they are not the same. They're not interchangeable. For jobs where there's the same cost, your margins are going to be less than your markups. Your markups are going to be more than your margins. And in our example, our markup percentage was 50 and our margin was 33.3%. So you can see that they are different. Anytime that you have a 50% markup on your cost, your margin will always be 33.33%. Mathematically, that's the way that works. That's a big difference. It needs to be understood and it needs to be accounted for adequately within your business. I have some very exciting news for all of you. The Contractor Coalition Summit is hosting a meetup at IBS and KIBS. So that's going to be Monday, February 24th, 2025. I know we're already into 2025. It's crazy. 6 to 8 p.m. It's at the Nomad at Park MGM, Las Vegas. So this is not a summit. This is not a conference. Honestly, this is just going to be a bunch of people hanging out, open bar, food, and all the drinks that you can enjoy. And you'll have extra because I don't drink, so you can have my drinks. Early bird pricing is live. There will be no tickets at the door. So if you want to go to this, you have to buy them beforehand. I'm posting a link to it on this post. Hop on there now. You're not going to want to miss out on this. Again, no tickets at the door. February 24th, 6 to 8 p.m., Nomad, Las Vegas, which is at the Park MGM. I'll be there. Nick will be there. Brad will be there. Morgan will be there. And a lot of other people. So come check it out. Open bar, food, great hangs, great hanging out. It's really going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you there. And let me know if you have any questions. Just because you have 100% markup on something, right? I have a $50,000 kitchen. I'm going to charge $100,000 for it. That's 100% markup. That does not mean that you are profitable or that your margins are sustainable for your business. You have to understand what your revenue is. You have to understand what your expenses are, what your deductions are, what the cost of goods sold are. You have to understand all of that in order to understand your profitability and your margins. Everyone would think that 100% markup is going to generate profit and generate sustainability within a business, but it may not be the case based on your business, the cost of your business, your direct and indirect costs. It may not be sustainable. So just do not assume that because you have a huge markup that your margins are going to also be huge, or that your business is sustainable, or that your business is profitable. So confusing markup and margin or not fully understanding them can lead to underpricing or overestimating profits on a project. When you start doing larger jobs, when the cost of the jobs go up and you cannot afford to put a 50% markup on the project because you need to remain competitive, there's more at stake because your margins are tighter. Your markups are less and your margins are tighter. So 2-3% can make or break you on that project. There's contractors and there's builders out there that don't make 2-3% margins. They're doing a ton of volume, their costs are high, and they are making 1.5% margin. That's not the world that I live in. I live in a lower volume, higher margin world. And that's because I like to be able to put less work into place and make a higher margin on it. I don't want to have to put 3-4 times the amount of work in place and then make a much lower margin on my work. I would rather be a low volume, high margin contractor than the other way around. And it depends on your market. It depends on your structure of your business, how you're set up. But I understand that my margin is much higher than most contractors, builders that do a larger volume of work or have $1 million projects that they're doing, right? They're selling over 7 figures every single year. Their margins are going to be less because they have a higher cost of business, higher indirect and direct cost of business. They're subcontracting more, so their costs go up relative to their sales. So they are a much lower margin than I am. That's just it just comes down to preference. Comes down to lifestyle, how much money you need to survive, what makes you happy. For me, being able to put less work into place and guaranteeing that I'm making a really good margin on it because I'm very lean, because I keep my costs down, guarantees that I don't need to feed a machine. I don't have this massive nut of overhead every single month that I need to sell just to break even. So I know that if I need to take it, a week or two off to be able to work on the business or do something for my personal life, whatever it may be, I understand that I don't need that work to keep the wheels turning, right? My margins are high. I can do less work and I can make a higher profit margin than somebody who's doing more volume, who has more expenses, who has more employees, who has more cost associated with their business. So that's the world that I prefer to live in. That's how I make money, essentially, is I understand that my margins are high. I look at the total amount of work, my revenue for the year, and my costs are very low. So the discrepancy or the difference between my revenue and my costs is large, which creates a higher profit margin. Typically speaking, when you're a bigger business and you have a lot more costs, yes, your revenue is much higher, but your costs are relative to that and proportionate to that. So they go up. So the disparity between your revenue and your cost is a lot closer than somebody like mine with lower numbers. So that, again, is how I make money. It's by creating a larger disparity between my revenue and the costs of my business to create better margins for me. And the way that I do that is by not selling a ton of work, not having a huge overhead, remaining very lean, ensuring that the work that I'm selling has the markups built into the cost of the project to set a selling price for my projects that dictates the margin that I need to survive. So I hope that this makes a little bit more sense. If it can be very confusing, but once you wrap your head around, simply put, like, just go on the website, look at the formulas that I have on there, do it with very easy numbers. And again, your markup is a component of the cost of the job, right? $50,000 kitchen, I have a 50% markup. That's generating me the 33.3% margin that I need to survive. So $50,000 job, that's the cost. I'm making $25,000 on that project, so I'm selling it at $75,000. That $25,000 is 33.33% of the selling price of the job, which is $75,000, which is dictating my 33.33% margin. So that's how they relate. That's how they work together. It seemed confusing at first. If you wrap your head around this, I did this as simply as possible so that it makes sense to you. It should take very short amount of your time, right? An hour or two to sit down and digest this and understand this and plug your own numbers into this to understand the difference between markup and margin and how that relates to your business, regardless of size, scale of business, however you're made up. But it's going to dictate all of your numbers. So if you need higher profits, typically you're going to need a higher markup. You're going to have to put more work into place or reduce your costs. So there's a couple ways to go about that. It's either spend less or sell more to create better margins. I prefer to spend less money and create a higher markup within that selling price to generate a higher margin for my business. So I hope that this helps all of you. I hope that the courses that Nick and I have been helpful for you. I know we had a Thanksgiving Black Friday sale where we sold a handful more courses. The reception has been great. I also put on a paint course where for years I had so many people ask me, what paint products do you use? What prep products do you use? And obviously there's specialty coatings. There's coatings that I use for cabinets, which may be different than my house paint, so to speak. But for interior paint products, I wanted to put a short course together, right? It's maybe an hour of your time, and then it lists everything, and it lists each, right? So I have maybe 4 or 5 primers. I have 3 or 4 trim paints. I have 6 prep products, 2 ceiling paints, 4 wall paints, whatever it may be. And I basically go through and I list all these. I describe where they shine, where they may fall flatter than other products, why I use them, what price point I use them for, what makes them good for that application, what applications I would use one paint versus another paint. And this is just for off the shelf products, right? You have any sort of interior house project and you want to guarantee that you're using the right prep, the right paint products without having to go into specialty coatings and create just a really good product that you can stand behind. I wanted to create a course and like a cheat sheet for this. So again, it's going to dig into primers, ceiling paint, wall paint, trim paint, and a bonus, all of my off the shelf prep products that I use and how I use them to prep walls and trim. Super quick. It's less than $100 to buy the course. A business expense of less than $100. I feel like I lose $100 every day. Is absolutely nothing to give you peace of mind to make sure that you are either doing the right thing or using the right product. So, I'm going to get more of these testimonials out there, but, a guy, Revive Bathworks, reached out to me and he was like, enrolled in the course, love it. And I said, hey, I appreciate it. Was it helpful? And he said, yes, very. I've never really loved painting, and so I've neglected to dive deep into learning it well. The course is very helpful to confirm what I've been doing right and what I've been doing poorly or missing altogether. Big boost of confidence. Thanks for y'all's work in our industry. So that's the goal for this course, is less than $100. I think it's $97. You can go in and you can either get the answers to the products that I use on 95% of my paint projects, or you can learn what I use for prep. You can reaffirm that you're doing the right thing, or it could put you in a completely different direction where it's like, oh, I didn't try that product. Oh, this is going to be better. This is better for spraying. This is better for brushing. I should be using this primer instead of that primer, and when and where to be using them. So that's the goal, is basically a very low investment in yourself, in your business, to have a full comprehension of, I can walk into essentially any paint store and get the products that I need to create a really great paint job, something that I can stand behind. Again, prep as well. Wall compounds, caulking, rapid caulking, nail filler, wood filler, what I'm using to prep all my trim, all my walls. I give you all of that stuff in there for less than $100. So if you want to support the podcast, you want to support what we're doing, that's a great low entry point into all of this coursework that we're putting in. You can see what it includes. You can see the videos, the photos. You can see all the written documentation of this, again, for less than $100. The other course that we have out right now is our online pre-construction course. Nick and I, for years, have integrated pre-con into our business to make sure that we're getting paid for the planning stage. So we are serving as a consultant on projects that we don't have a work contract for, right? So they are hiring us prior to construction contract to price, value engineer, help design, bring a project from concept to work contract with budgeting and consulting. So we walk you through that entire process, all the deliverables that we include, how to sell that to clients. And again, that's one of those courses where it should make you money immediately. So that the price point in that course is higher. I believe there is a payment plan, but then also you can just enroll and pay for it once. But we set the price of that course at $1,850. And the thought process behind that, which we put a lot of time into this, way more than we probably should have. But that could incentivize you to say, hey, somebody gets a hold of me, I'm going to charge them for pre-con, and my first fee is going to be $2,000, and you're going to cover the cost of that course to start implementing pre-con into your life, into your business right off the bat, and be able to sell that. So you have somebody reach out to you, you're interested in pre-con, you're interested in learning about what Nick and my process looks like. Okay, hey, it's a smaller project. Let's get our feet wet. We're going to charge you $2,000, $2,500, $3,000, whatever it may be. You're immediately covering the cost of the course, investing in yourself, and then making money. That core or that pre-con contract and everyone moving forward. Typically for me, kitchens, if it's $100,000, $150,000 kitchen, we're doing about $8,500 worth of pre-construction work that I'm getting paid for. It is not going towards the project. So I'm selling them on the kitchen design, going through building that project on paper, pricing that project, getting my subs together, and I'm generally selling that for around $8,500. Which I never did before. And I would price kitchens out and I would waste so much time, and I'd provide them with floor plans and drawings, and then they'd just either go with someone else, find somebody cheaper. So now I'm, on average $8,500 I'm charging and selling this pre-construction that is not a retainer, that doesn't go towards the job. If they end up not doing the kitchen, that's my money to keep. So that's the goal for you, right? That you can pay a one-time fee and start charging this immediately to not only up your business, differentiate yourself, but to start making money, like an alternative revenue stream for your business, especially if you're a small owner operator and you don't want to be doing two jobs at a time. You need a way to make some money and land clients before and better vet your clients and have another income stream or revenue stream for your business. It's a great way to do that. And the last course that we are putting out is marketing and lead gen for contractors. And this price point's probably going to be around the $250, $300, not 100% certain now. We are wrapping up that course, but that's going to walk you through everything that we do to establish your business, gain trust, gain credibility within your business in order to market, advertise, and generate the leads that you need to create a sustainable business. So we all get hired because our clients trust us. How are you going to market yourself? How are you going to advertise yourself? How are you going to create leads for clients that trust you and want to hire you rather than just price shop? So that course is going to be really great for anyone who wants to understand how we market and generate leads both online and offline. And online is social media, your website, SEO, email marketing campaigns, paid advertising, blogs, everything digital. How are you handling the marketing and the lead gen for your business on the digital aspect and side of things? And then also the offline, right? How are you networking with your community? How are you building a referral process and system? How are you marketing with other contractors? What's your lead gen look like offline? So we go into online, offline, how to differentiate yourself, where you should be spending the time. We include a content calendar for you. We include a checklist of how you should be marketing and advertising. We create, a 2-month plan as to how to integrate this into your business. So that's a really, really great quick hit course. Again, $250, $300. We're working on the price point right now where that should live, but to just better market, better advertise, create a more sustainable, robust lead generation for your business, especially with everything with the economy slowing down and tapering off some. So that's something that you're going to want to look into that's going to be coming out in the coming weeks. You can find all of this information on the website or sign up for our email list, probably even more so than the website. Most of this information, if you want to hear about it first or how to enroll, or if we have any sales and specials going on, is going to be to sign up for the Modern Craftsman email list, which you can get that on the website. There should be a pop-up or on the contact page. So as always, I appreciate everyone hanging around. I hope that this mathematic and I feel like data-driven podcast was not too mundane, not too boring, and hopefully I simplified the difference between markup and margin for you, again, hop on the website and check out the blog post if you need help with that. But I will catch all of you next week. As always, thank you for everything. Thank you for everyone who participated in the Black Friday sale. And as always, if you have any questions, if you want to hop on a consulting call with me, right? You want to go over stuff like this markup margin, what my markups look like, what my margins look like, how, what my revenue is, how I make money. If you want to dig into your business a little more deeply, reach out to me. We can set up a consulting call. Tyler at trghomeconcepts.com. Enjoy the rest of your week.